Good morning, grasshoppers. It is time for us to look at a game involving a tremendous amount of piece play. Now, the art of the sacrifice is the essence of making the most of your use of time in exchange for material. And sacrificing material basically means that you have a predominance in attackers to the point that you can give up something in order to open up the necessary lines to carry through something of an attack. Now, there are positional sacrifices, of course, that lead to better end games, or small gains in material, or maybe the control of space, or positional attributes such as weakened squares, leading to a slightly better position. So positional sacrifices, usually involving perhaps might say the gambit of a pawn, are really, really useful. So for the most part, in this particular game, Rudolf Spielmann was primarily and predominantly an e4 player. So therefore d4, although it was in his repertoire, did not appear as often in his most famous games. And the King's Gambit, of course, in the early 1900s had gone through a little bit of a questionable phase as Black started to return the pawn or decline the gambit by sacrificing with the From's counter gambit. So the idea here is that f4 will be met by d5. And it is unfortunate that this move is available to Black in those days. E takes d5 was often met by e4, and I still play this to a great extent as it makes White's development very tricky and awkward, as I played this morning, even in a Dojo game that was almost effortless, although it was riddled with mistakes on my part. You may participate in these Dojo sessions by joining the dojo on Lee Chess, the Master Chess Dojo, Monday through Friday, usually 3+2, and the weekend events are the Master Chess Dojo and Rapid and Classical, which are almost always 5+5 or greater. I have not yet started our classical arenas. So given the fact that d5 is possible, this led to the advent of the Vienna game, which Rudolf Spielmann employed quite frequently in a number of ways to prevent d5. If Black knows what he's doing, he will instantly prepare the move d5 and counterattack in the center. And this goes with my general rule that if the e5 pawn is not attacked, there's no need to play knight c6. So, for example, the standard continuation of knight f3, knight c6 leads to either the Spanish game, the Italian game, the Scotch opening, or traditional openings such as the very youthful Four Knights game. However, moves like bishop c4, as even played by myself this morning successfully, I answered bishop c4 with knight f6, counterattacking the pawn and preventing any possible incursions of the queen to threaten those youthful four-move sacrifice attacks. Now, the one exception to the e5 pawn being attacked that I would probably allocate is the queen attack move. I enjoy playing knight f6 and sacrificing the pawn and gaining a tremendous amount of time and getting my king safe and going against this premature queen attacking move. And you gain a lot of time, and usually you'll gain either your queen back or you'll gain footroads or inroads into the center for outposts that you'll enjoy. So this attack, which was advocated by myself and protege international master-elect, FIDE Master Donnie Ariel, we worked it out. It looks like Black has a lot of counterplay, despite what Lee Chess Engines or Stockfish thinks. It is quite difficult. So, as it turns out, after the move knight f6, we reach the very common Vienna Gambit. The Vienna Gambit cannot be accepted because after e takes f5, the space gained by the pawn, whether it's right away or later, Black can even try queen to e7, but queen to e2 enforces the space in the center, and we're going to quickly get d4, and bishop takes f4, and castle queenside with raging, expanding, attacking possibilities. The bishop on f1 doesn't necessarily need to be developed, and the knight's only square, unfortunately, ultimately, is g8. So this is going to lead to an overwhelming position for white. Hence, the main reason why black answers knight c3 with knight f6. After all, the e5 pawn was not attacked, therefore it did not need to be defended, but we will instantly go upon the counterattack. And the standard move, f takes e5, knight takes e4. After all, we have to follow up on our ideas of commanding the center. The d5 pawn is protected, therefore there are some possibilities, and I've won many games against queen h4 by playing in this position d3. Queen h4 does not lead to an advantage for black. Therefore, this is very enterprising, and unfortunately the main line leads to a very dry position that doesn't lead to much. The main line of that d3 variation with black gaining space with d4 after an exchange of knights. So needless to say, after knight takes e4, knight to f3, saving our king side, is the perfect response. And as it turns out, Spielmann is not afraid to play the main line. It does look a little bit awkward, and after bishop to g4, there's the remarkable queen e2 anyway, putting pressure on the knight on e4, and at the same time threatening queen to b5 check. And in a sense, pinpointing the weakness on b7 while taking advantage of the king not being able to leave the center. In this particular position, black attempts to get Spielmann out of counterplay while defending his weakness with knight to c5. This is an unfortunate move on his part, actually, if you must know the truth. As it turns out, white can simply pursue this knight by grabbing the center, and this leads to an amazing combination possibility. After all, d5 was in itself a sacrifice, as black gets to remove the defender of the center and jump right in with the attack. Now, of course, we're going to be expanding in the center as fast as humanly possible. It seems like black is okay. Namaste, it's Arena Chan. I fixed my sound alerts and my follow button at that moment. As black has managed to secure his center, give it, it's Arena Chan a quick shout out, as you should be following her for a lovely stream, usually involving music and chess, and occasionally more. I'm hoping for more, anyway. So here we are. We're basically going to be going over this relatively powerful game by Spielmann because of its impressiveness, usually blunders. I think you can include that in your stream title because people love the schadenfreude of the moment involving this. Now, I just have to put the timer up, as we're missing the timer. And we're going to look for some candidate moves for white. And in this particular position, obviously we need more than 45 seconds. But this is the ideal time control, just like I recommend 3+2 or nothing necessarily faster than 5 minutes. You do get a chance to exercise your candidate move choices. After all, white is has nearly completed his development. Therefore, we can take advantage of our superiority in material. We're actually up in material arena, and we were discussing this in the intro to this video on demand. So that basically When we have a superiority in material, this leads to the conditions that are necessary for the sacrifice. Therefore, we can look at the fact that black's king is in the center, and the only thing that's really needed for us is to get our rook on a1 into the center. So knight takes rook d5, c takes d5, rook takes d5, gains the necessary amount of time. I think rook takes d5 actually is something. But because we're ahead in material, these are the conditions for the sacrifice, and you have to keep your opponent busy at all times. Now, I've always played dynamically, and in this particular position, we'll do. We're only going to get a few choices here for candidates' moves in. We're going to do it one more time because this one is not necessarily as difficult, because we have a choice between harassing the king and getting the rook into the center on a couple of different occasions. It's only a matter of how do we wish to go about it. There are a couple of moves that try to take advantage of the queen being on the open e-file. Right? The only thing left out there is arena. The only thing left out there might be bishop to d4 and one other move, which was played by Spielmann himself to put more pressure on the queen. This is a direct assault on the queen with the threat of rook to d8 check. And the queen is going to be caught in the center because of rook on a to e1 and the bishop on e3 being able to spring into the position in any manner which sees fit. So I guess the first move that's being threatened in this particular moment is bishop takes c5. That is the main idea that's being threatened right now. Rook takes c5, of course, is a direct threat. I'm assuming that the knight might leave that general area and try to obstruct it, maybe with the knight on c to d7. But then we're just going to regroup and bring our rook back and across and try to harass the queen in this manner, because we don't have rook to e5 or rook to d8 possibilities. So as it turns out, after the move bishop to c4, black seeks exchanges. After all, he is ahead in material. Flamberg is ahead in material. I always feel like I want to spell this name with two M's, just like Spielmann is with two N's. Flamberg. So we're going to do it one more time for this short video. We're going to ask for some candidate moves for white, and this does take a certain awareness of what is going on in the position to be able to find the right moves, given the fact that the bishop on c4 and the queen are both being attacked. And finding three moves is critical in many other positions. Perhaps not so much this one, as things are a wee bit forced. And because of the forced nature of this position, our moves have to be that much more succinct. This goes into the absolute essentials that everyone should know type games. Well, the third we have been talking about the entirety of the game. The move played by Spielmann in this position is a relative game ender. Basically, a relative game ender. Whether you chose rook on a to e1, I'm sorry, not rook on h to e1, which is certainly decisive. Bishop to b5 check, certainly decisive. Queen takes e4 still wins, with the idea of rook e5 check and recapturing, and we're no longer down any material. However, in this particular game, Spielmann finds a very succinct removing of the defender with bishop takes c5. After all, the king and the emphasis of the king being in the center is very clear, and this is, for the most part, enough to end the game as we know it. And as the sunrise has finally hit me, All that we really need to see in this particular position is that although black resigned here, queen takes f3 is met by rook to e1 check, followed by mate in 2. There are a lot of fancy mates here, of course. We could actually try to go for even more with this discovery, but simply rook to d8 check ends the game. Yeah, removing the defender. And this is the art of the sacrifice. We're going to start again from the beginning. We talked about the King's Gambit being met by d5. It's a small irony that this move has more or less put the quash on the King's Gambit, because black strikes out with 2 very active bishops, and white is not necessarily ahead in time. And as it turns out, this led to the advent in the early 1900s of the Vienna game, which is basically a move to prevent or nullify the effect of d5 by black in the center. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the start of the video, if the pawn on e5 is not attacked, then black should bring out the guardian of the king side, knight f6. This works against bishop c4 and almost any other move that doesn't involve a direct attack on e5. So we should always just keep developing our kingside pieces with the need to castle. Therefore, after knight to c3, knight f6, the Vienna Gambit might ensue, but we have to follow up on our move with d5. Most of my opponents, when I do end up in the Vienna game, after all, I like to play knight c3 on move 1, my opponents usually don't find the move d5, and this is not the original intention. The original intention, of course, is not to combat d5, but to bother the knight. And I mentioned how in the past I've won many short games with d3. It's worth noting that queen to h4 gets into a lot of trouble, as knight f3 can be met by knight g3, and then there's just as much trouble. I believe Steinitz worked this out to be a clear advantage for white, but it's not that clear. It's more or less just an equal game, as both attacks have a certain relevance toward their opponent's kings. It's definitely worth looking into in your Lichess database. You will find all the answers, but traditionally, most players have played either knight f3 in this position or queen f3 to put pressure on the knight on e4. And certainly this is a perfectly reasonable response. I know Spielmann has played queen f3 in many of his games. However, knight f3, and the best response for black in this position, not bishop c5, which might run into d4. I take it back. Bishop c5 is a perfectly acceptable move. After all, what's the loss of Tempi between friends? However, queen e2 in all cases, for the most part, appears to be the best, even against the move bishop to g4, which we saw queen to e2, forcing something to be done about this knight. Knight takes c3 is usually met by d takes c3, and white is comfortably better in this position, as we're going to develop our bishop, castle queenside, and everything is good for white. I'm a big believer in the Vienna game over the Scotch game, for example, but not the Scotch Gambit. Scotch Gambit is dynamic enough that everyone should still enjoy playing chess to a great extent. However, in this particular game, just a brief synopsis: after knight to c5, Rudolf Spielmann finds the amazing pawn sacrifice d4. This doesn't appear to be a pawn sacrifice at first, but we have to have complete command over the diagonals and the weakened squares in the position. As bishop takes f3, queen takes f3 check, and queen takes d4 runs into the exact position where we started. And it is in this position that the essence and the beauty of this game prevails. Knight takes d5 is objectively a better move than rook takes d5, and as Stockfish points out, bishop to b5 is even more effective, removing the defender of d5 without sacrificing anything directly in the center. But we wouldn't have Spielmann's beauty with knight takes d5 when black does have to find a better move to get his queen off the c file with queen to c7. Instead, the move queen e4, queen e6 runs into bishop c4, and then the fun begins. Black misses his opportunity to continue his development and pretend like nothing is wrong with knight c6, and falls into the double question mark move, queen to e4, which leads to a relatively forced checkmate as we remove the defender. I hope everyone enjoyed this game. It was quite good. In the opening, though, we most of the time capture away from the center rather than b takes c3 in the opening if we do have a pawn center to be built upon. However, with the open lines that were here, and in most of the opening choices, the principle is bucked by the fact that we are going to get a bishop off of c1 faster by recapturing with d takes c3. So we're talking the difference of 2 tempi. And 2 tempi are 2/3 of a pawn's value. That is, a pawn is worth 3 moves of time. 3 moves of time in almost all gambits is the requisite for, let's just say, the poison pawn variation of the Najdorf, where black has to develop a queen to b6, capture the pawn on b2, and then retreat the queen to safety. Black loses a lot of time in the poison pawn Najdorf trying to grab a pawn while white continues to develop his pieces, and he has full compensation for the lost pawn. In any event, thank you for the raid. It's Arena Chan. If you're not already following her, she is an aspiring, amazing streamer. I'm, of course, building upon high hopes and expectations there, which I can only apologize for, as I pass this one on to another streamer. I want to thank everyone for being here. We are going to, we're only 30 or 28 subs away from another emote. I don't know that it's an animated emote. I haven't checked our sub points. Rogan is streaming. Thank you for that nod. We're going to head over to Rogan Joe Sloan, Kingslayer Sloan. And because he hasn't been here for the last couple of days, I have failed to take off which I'm going to do right now at the end of every stream. We'll remove that subs only chat, which I forgot to do the last time for 2 days. And I blame Rogan, because had he been here, we would not have had subs only chat on for 2 days straight. In any event, Kingslayer Sloan, he is at the top of my list as we're allowed to sort. And he's a lovely guy, my favorite YouTube editor. Cheers, everyone, and thank you. Have a great day. Thank you, Arena, for being here. Let's run the ending credits just to make this complete. And we will do another one in just a few minutes if we have time. We're going to do another Spielmann masterpiece on the Further Art of the Sacrifice series, and this will be kept in a YouTube collection as well. So please be certain to subscribe on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button. Be certain to pause the video if you need more than 45 seconds in each video to choose your candidate moves, and I would suggest reviewing all of these. Cheers and ciao, everyone. Thank you, Arena, for being here. You are so lovely. I'm going to refund your hydrate since I'm off stream already. Have a great day. Cheers and ciao.